Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Janet Snouse. I am one of the elementary science specialists. We also have a lot of specialists on our team. I believe a couple of our folks are here. Dr. Spinner is our director of science, and Latrice Baker is our secondary science supervisor. So I know that they are here to help out in any way. Um, I'm seeing a chat that you guys can't hear me. Hopefully that is not the case. We are going to look at both the elementary and secondary science fair today. And of course, our topic is surviving the science fair. I want to talk a little bit first about why the science fair. It is so wonderful to help develop our 21st century students. And I love this visual because 21st century kids are global citizens. They're creative, they're mission driven, they're active, they're collaborators, innovators, they are investigators, inspirational. And so many of these skills that we look for in science fair are found in our 21st century students. Also, science fair does help our students perform at a higher level on the Webb's DOK charts. This is when we talk about how students think. So we see that the activities that are important in the science fair are high level thinking activities. So by doing the science fair, our students actually become better thinkers. And of course, some of us in grades 5, grades 8 in biology, we do take those state tests, and a lot of the questions are going to relate to nature of science, which is really what the science fair is all about. So here we see some standards and some things that have appeared in the past on the 5th grade science test, which includes that defining a testable problem, defining conclusions, analyzing data, again, talking about those nature science, what we would see on a state test. We've mentioned the 5th grade already. For 8th grade, what we would see on a state test would be comparing methods and results, models, analyzing data, defending conclusions, the importance of control variables, or variables where they are making predictions. So all of these pieces of the science fair would also be seen on a state test. And I love this quote because more than 35 years of solid research shows that inquiry is the best way for learners to construct meaning in science. And of course, that is what the science fair is. It's inquiry that your child, our students, are creating and engaged in. It's something that they're choosing, not something that a teacher or those of us at the school are saying, here's what we're learning today. They are coming up with those things that they're passionate about, that they're curious about, that they want to explore and learn more about. So when we're doing a science fair project, what are the basics of science research? Of course, secondary, you'd also have engineering pieces too, but for us, for science, we are really looking at those science investigations. So we always start off with asking a question. Once you come up with that question, that one thing that you're really curious about, do some background research, find out everything that you can about that subject. Once you have your knowledge built up, then you're going to construct your hypothesis. And that's going to be what you think is going to happen. Usually, and your teachers are going to be guiding you during this process, but usually that's going to be an if then statement. If I do this, then this will happen. And so again, we're going to see our teachers will help us with that. But once we've got that hypothesis, we are going to design our test. How are we going to do our test? And then, of course, we are going to perform our test. Once we know our procedure is working, yes, then we're going to gather our data, analyze the data, draw some conclusions. What if the procedure is not working? If we have to go back, sometimes we have to go back and redefine that procedure. So there are steps that we can go through just to make sure that we are following this. If it's not working, that we're correcting it. What we have, of course, is once we've got that procedure done and we have gathered our data, we find out everything's working well, then we're going to look at our data and we're going to draw some conclusions. So what happens if the results align with our hypothesis? We're going to communicate that. What happens if our results don't align with our hypothesis? In other words, they're not supporting our hypothesis.
we're still going to communicate that. Either way, it's okay if our hypothesis is not right. It's all about the learning process. Now, if our hypothesis is not correct, that could give us ideas to go back and come up with a new project. Maybe that would be a project for next year in the science fair. So some awesome ways that science is a continual process that's continually growing and getting a little bit better. Before I talk about the elementary science fair, there is a quick little inspirational video that I want to show. There is a movie that is out. It's actually on Disney right now. National Geographic has put it out or produced it, sorry. And this movie is following students that have competed in the regional fairs and they've gone on to the International Science Fair. So these are all high school students that are competing on an international level. This fair usually happens in the United States, and I believe Miss Baker, we've had several of our Duval County public school students go. So I just want to show this because this does follow some students, and this is just a quick little overview.
I would say that a lot of people are jealous of me.
On deadlines, I'm awful. I wait until the deadline to start working.
I listen to trap music and classical music.
Pass it up. Blast it up full volume.
I actually don't listen to classical music that much. I just listen to mostly trap.
You're not going to cure cancer, you're going to prevent cancer.
Yes.
If you're there just to win the prize, you're missing the point of science fair.
You enter into this new kind of world I didn't even know kind of existed.
It's one of the best weeks of my life, like every time I go there.
Ela tem sonho realmente de sair, de crescer. E eu acredito que se eles ganharem lá, as portas talvez vão se abrir.
I'm gonna be so proud when one of my kids win a Nobel Prize, because they will.
Finalists from 78 countries, regions, and territories around the world.
You can think of it as the Olympics of science fair.
Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the most impressive. I plan on shaking the planet until I'm convalescent. If I could just achieve and not just make believe that anybody else is gonna create what only I can see. Simple as 1, 2, 3.
Winning will change your life in ways that you don't even comprehend.
Welcome to Los Angeles.
Today's like the judging day. So we're gonna get judged for what, like 6 hours today? I don't know.
Okay, so that is following high school students that have made it through their school fairs, their district fairs, their regional fairs, state fairs, and they've gone on to international. The success stories are amazing. At the International Science Fair, they do give away around $8 million worth of cash and prizes every year. So it is phenomenal where the kids can go over time. So I want to talk now, because we start off with our elementary science fair. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that, and then I'm going to focus on the secondary. So for elementary science fair, your elementary teacher will share their science fair packets. A lot of our teachers, a lot of our schools have packets that they've created to help you with the process and to help your students with the process. So they will communicate that with you. If you have questions, go and ask your teacher. They are there to help. And if they have questions, usually they contact our team, our specialist team, and we can help facilitate that too. Be prepared, of course, when you're doing a science fair to follow the steps of the scientific investigation, because that's what we're looking at the elementary level. And of course, I'm going to talk a lot about safety rules tonight. We want to make sure we are following the safety rules. There are some important dates for the elementary fair. Again, this is for elementary school fairs, should be held prior to December 2nd. So your school fair will probably be before December 2nd. After that, your school is going to select, or they can select up to 6 projects to compete in our district science fair. Judging will begin virtually on January 5th and will continue through January 11th. The big day for us that's so much fun is the fair itself. Project boards are set up at University of North Florida. Your teachers bring them and set them up January 10th, but January 12th is when our students come. And we have a lot of students, a lot of schools. It is just a phenomenal, wonderful experience. And as a specialist, I absolutely love seeing the projects to see what our students do. It's wonderful. We're going to pause and I'm going to get out of the PowerPoint because I want to look at the district elementary science fair packet. And this is also available on our website. I'll show you how to get to that. But this is what your schools are going to get. And again, some of them have simplified this for you. So whatever your school is giving you, please follow that. But for pre-K students, they would be doing a class project. For kindergarten, first and second grade students, they can choose either to do a class project. Your teachers might be working on a class project with them, or they can enter an individual project. Grades 3 through 5, all of our projects are going to either be individual projects or group projects. And when we talk about group projects, we're talking about a group of students, not more than 3 students, and they do need to be in the same grade level. So again, that's the basics of it. We do have 3 categories that we really focus on: life science, physical science, and earth space science. And your teacher, again, is going to help you with displays, but displays that if you are selected to come to the district fair, it does need to be on a freestanding board. And of course, your schools and your teachers will help you with that when you get to that part. There are some projects that I want to focus on. These are projects that we would not allow at our district fair just because they're not safe. So when we have rules of the science fair, they are there to keep your students safe, to keep you safe, to keep others safe, to keep animals and property safe. So we just want to make sure there are no issues, that everyone's safe. So we don't allow any projects that involve humans, animals, mold, human blood, or pathogens. Those would be prohibited. And the reason being is with human projects, even at the secondary level, you have to work with someone like a medical doctor or a nurse, someone that's specialized in making sure that any humans that would be involved would be safe. Animals, anything that has a backbone, a vertebrate animal, there's a lot of rules that govern animals, and we have to make sure those rules are followed. So again, on the elementary fair, we don't allow them. Secondary, you would be allowed to if you're following the rules and protocols. Human bloods, pathogens, those type of projects, even at the middle school level, are not allowed, or I should say at the middle school, some are allowed, but again, very strict rules. And at the secondary level, when they do allow them, it is very strict. It's very hard to get those bacteria, mold, viruses, those type of projects into a competition. But at the elementary level, I just want to stress again, we don't allow those because they can be very risky. One story at the state fair that I went to involved a student that had just cultured, which means they swabbed doorknobs and put it in a petri dish and grew whatever they found on the doorknob. Ended up being spinal meningitis. The student contracted spinal meningitis because of that culturing and died from it. So those microbial projects, again, can be very dangerous. So we don't allow them because we do want to keep your students safe. Mold, same, that can be very bad for our lungs. And again, we don't want to have any risk within the science fair. Of course, no weapons of any type. That would be no guns, no arrows, catapults, knives, darts, paintball guns, no pepper spray, potato guns, explosives. So we don't allow any of those, again, just because they can be dangerous. They are more risky. As we go through the project, so in our elementary science fair project, we do have or guide, we do have a page that talks about judging. So what we're looking for, what the judges are looking for. Look at that because that will help you understand where to kind of guide your project, what we're looking for. 40% is going to be that scientific thought. 20% will be those scientific concepts, understanding the science behind it. In other words, project creativity is 10%. I always say that's not talking about the most creative looking board. It's the most creative idea for science, something that's unusual, something the judges have never seen before. Those are the best projects. And we do, of course, 20% of the judging will be on the board itself. So that's where that that board piece comes in. And for our third, fourth, and fifth grade projects, a few of our projects, not all of them, but our top projects will be after the first round of judging is done. Some of our students may be selected for a interview. Again, that would be something that your teachers would notify you if your student qualified for that interview. Not all students will. But look at the judging criteria. It's really great information.
And
Also,
Janet, we've got another hand up.
Sorry, I just had a question on why. I guess I was wondering, is this like for all grades and not just middle school? Because the rubric said
right. No,
K
I'm
through
just
5.
talking about elementary right now, and I'm going to talk about the secondary here in just a second. So that is a very good question. Right now, I'm focused on the elementary. So this would just be for our K through 5 students right now. I'm getting ready to get into the secondary. So thank you. So again, for elementary, we do have some science fair helpful hints here. And my favorite one, number 14, be creative and have fun. So look through these, make sure you're following them. They will give you some ideas on how to make a successful board, how to make a successful project. One of the areas students struggle with, no matter what grade level, even though, of course, I'm focusing on elementary, but sometimes it's hard to think of that topic. I always say, what is it that you're passionate about? What is it that you want to learn about? What is it that you could improve? Some years I've seen projects that have come through after hurricanes where students have come up with a better way of keeping water out of houses or to protect their houses from trees falling down. So their inspiration can come from whatever's happening at the time. Coronavirus, when it came through, a lot of secondary students were interested in that, but because it is dangerous, it's not a topic any grade level would be allowed to test. Even through international, those are not allowed because it is obviously not something that's safe. But what is it you're passionate about? Sports topics sometimes are powerful. What is going to help me hit, or what type of bat hits the ball further? Those type of projects are wonderful if it's something that your child is interested in and passionate about. That's where we want to start. And then from there, we would look for that testable question. So your teachers will be able to help them with that. But again, we've got this to help guide. I'm going to scroll down a little bit further because we do have just some general topic ideas. If you're wanting to do life science, animals, you could observe them if, for example, you're not manipulating the environment. So if I'm watching birds outside my window and all I do is watch and I see how many birds are coming to my yard at, 10 o'clock in the morning versus 6 o'clock in the evening, and I don't do anything, I'm not putting food out, nothing is being manipulated, that type of observational study is fine. Once I go out and I start putting bird food outside, then I'm turning it into an animal project that wouldn't be allowed. So ask, if you're not sure, ask your teachers will guide you. And of course, if they have any questions, they'll ask us. But earth space, we've got physical science categories. This could help. Just looking at some of these topics may help your child come up with some ideas that they might be interested in. And then there are some internet sites that could help you. Again, for a creative project, you don't want to copy it verbatim, a project idea, but it can give you the inspiration and give you some ideas. So Science Buddies, Science Fair Central have always been a few of my favorites. So again, this is in the elementary science fair packet. I want to scroll down because some of these forms that you see here are just for the schools. As we get here, this is what a board would look like. So I will say this type of layout is a good layout, whether you're elementary or secondary. You want your board to read logically. You don't want your judges to have to jump around the board to try to find the different parts. Remember at the very beginning, we talked about that science process where we've got our problem, we do our research, and then we create our materials and procedures, and then we gather our data, and then we draw results and conclusions. All that is, I call it like a storyline. So our board should read like a storyline. The title, of course, is usually in the center. The data is usually in the center because that's kind of the first thing that judges are going to look at. That's where their eyes are going to go again, no matter what grade level. This is pretty standard. And then for the rest of it, the left side is the beginning of the project, our problem, hypothesis, variables, materials. We see that there. Procedures might even be on that side, again, depending on how you lay out your board. If not, your procedures might be in the center or they might be on the right-hand side. Again, just simply depending on how much space you need for those pieces. And of course, the right-hand side is where you've got your results, your conclusion, and your abstract. Abstract is just a short summary of what you did with your project from beginning to end. So that is just a simple layout that is standard, whether you are elementary, which again is what I'm talking about right now, or whether you are secondary. And it gives a little bit more information here. So that is just a quick overview of the Science Fair packet. You would find that on the DCPS website if you want to see that packet. To find it, you would just go to the main DCPS page, Google it. I'm going to click through this, go to departments, find science, click on that. That is going to take you to our science main page. And here you've got the names of our director of science and our supervisors of elementary and secondary science. So that's contact information. But if you scroll down, you're going to see elementary science fair. Just click on that. And that will take you to the site that has the District Elementary Science Fair packet available that I just showed you. So please look at it, take some time. There's a lot of information in it. You could also look and see who the District Science Fair winners were last year. So you could also see what we had, or in 2021, 22 last year. So you can see the Science Fair packet from 2019. So we do have some older things there, but remember 2022, 2023, is what we are focused on. Before I talk about secondary, do we have any questions about the elementary fair? Not hearing anyone come off mute, but feel
What
free
about
to.
what
Mhm.
about Duval Virtual? Do they have to do science fair, the science fair project as well?
So if you're participating in the science fair, your teacher, of course, can help guide that. But yes, it would be the same processes. You'd be following that same procedure. And of course, dropping off the board for, at the, let me step back and say, we are doing a two-part judging. So part of our judging will be virtual. So your teacher would help get that uploaded for us to judge virtually. And then the project itself would be dropped off at University of North Florida for the fair for that final judging. And so everyone can see what incredible research we have. So yes, even with the virtual school, that is, if you want to participate, that is available. Okay, so let me go back to our current slide. So I just, again, want to reiterate with the elementary fair and the secondary fair, the reason why there are so many rules are simply to protect your students and others from potentially harmful situations. And so as things occur, sometimes rules get written. So secondary fair, which we're going to talk about right now, has more rules. Your secondary teacher, your teacher, if you're on the secondary level, this is middle school and high school students, your teachers will help guide you with those rules and procedures. I do want to make sure you're communicating with your teacher. Ask them first if you have any questions. They will ask us. They will get us those questions if you have any needs. And of course, feel free to contact us directly in the science department anytime. One thing that's a little bit different that I want to focus on, I didn't mention the science journals in the elementary. We like that to be a model in elementary, but secondary, it is a requirement, especially if you want to go on to other competitions. So maybe you're wanting to compete in the Duval County Science Fair, but you also want to compete in the regional fair. And hopefully, if you were able to place, you go on to that state. And if you're a high school, hopefully you're going on to that international competition. We want successful projects, but bound science journals are a requirement. So again, make sure you're communicating with your teacher so that they can help you with that process. And we always follow the ISIF rules. ISIF rules are vital. So that ISIF is the International Science and Engineering Fair. State follows those rules. Regional fairs would follow those rules. We all follow those rules. So just make sure you're aware of that. We're going to look at where to find that information, and we are going to delve into the secondary in a little bit more detail now. There are some dates, and I believe Ms. Baker is on the call too. Ms. Baker, if there's anything that you want to add at any point, please jump off mute and add to this. But your school fair on the secondary level should be held prior to December 18th. Project submissions need to be submitted by your school before January 4th. Project drop-off for judging is going to happen January 11th through 17th, and then the secondary fair for our district is going to be at University of North Florida on January 19th. So those are your most important dates. I want to look at the secondary packet. If you go, again, we saw how to find the elementary fair packet. Notice with science, if I scroll down a little bit further, I'm going to see secondary science fair, and it's going to look like this. I love this because this is updated with the 21-22 winners. You can see what project titles they had. I always think it's kind of neat to see what students were investigating, what was successful. And then right down here, there's a DCPS Science Fair handbook that you can pull up and go through. And so if we look at this, we can see that there is a packet that you would want to go through, and it's going to help guide you as you're going through the process of creating your science fair project. So we see these main categories: identifying your testable question or problems. So this is going to help guide you with coming up with those questions. Variables, we definitely need to identify our variables. Even on the elementary level, we're asking students to identify the variables. So we want your tested variable, what you're going to be changing in your science fair. The outcome variable or dependent variable is what you're measuring. So that if-then statement is for your hypothesis is super helpful for helping you develop your hypothesis, but also for identifying those variables. So read through this because this gives some more information on your variables. We come down in your research plan, we get into a little bit more detail as we get to the secondary level. There are forms that have to be completed for competition, and we want all of our students to go through those processes, of course, and be prepared in case you do want to go into those higher level competitions. Again, I call it the, where those money prizes are that we just saw in that first video. But there are some forms. For example, you would need to have a research plan and a student checklist 1A form that has to be approved, that you would get to your teacher. It has to be approved before you really start doing any research. All these forms have very specific processes and due dates. Some of the forms have to be done before you actually do your research. Some of them, of course, would be done afterwards. But make sure you're following this because this is going to guide you through the process and make sure that you are doing things in the correct order. I can say as a teacher and as a regional director who had taken students to the state fair every year, there have been times that dates have become an issue when they were reviewing the paperwork, and they would ask for my students' composition book, and if things did not match the composition book dates, we've had students disqualified. So it's very rare, but it can happen. So just make sure, again, you're very strict with keeping that journal. Everything is bound. You're writing in ink. You're not ripping out any pages, not adding anything to it. Just going through the process. They want to see that. Ms. Baker, if you're still on that, is there a more current one that will be coming out to our teachers? This is the one that we have online right now.
Yes, so the only edits is we'll remove the COVID modifications because we're not in COVID any longer.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. It's the same. It's again keeping with the ISIF rules and with everything that would be standard with the other level of fairs. So thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. So yes, it will be the same. So the research plan, again, make sure you're following that. There is a form that you would need to fill out, again, that has to be done if you're going to go into these other competitions. Lots of rules here. I don't have enough time to go through them all, but please make sure you're reading them. It's getting into more details about the humans, the animals, the PHBAs, potentially hazardous biological agents, chemicals, activities, and devices. Again, things that we're saying don't do at the elementary level for the secondary if they are approved and if there is the proper supervisor. Again, it might be a medical doctor, it might be a microbiologist at the secondary level, at the high school level. There are only specific scientists that are allowed to sponsor these projects. So just, again, keep in contact with your teacher. They will ask those questions if needed to make sure that your project is in compliance so that you would be eligible. There's a piece that talks about the composition book. Again, it's going to go over those details, how to do that notebook. Again, the project composition book, that what I'm calling the journal, there have been times that if it's not done as a process, it can have water stains on it, that's fine. It could have spills on it, that's fine. It could be messy, that's fine. But it just has to be consistent. It has to be in ink. It does need to have the dates on it. And it needs to be a process. We need to see where the students' thought process is going as they are going through the science research process. Procedures, this will give you some information on writing your procedures. I love the fact that it's got the steps listed specifically as again, as a director, as a judge. Judges, if everything runs together, they're not going to take the time to read it. They have just limited time, and they're really, your project board is your communication. And if your procedures aren't clearly lined in a logical manner, it's really hard for the judges to fairly judge that project. So just make sure step by step, very specific, very clear, and laid out in such a way that it's easy for those judges to read. Your data tables, lots of information here on what we need for a data table. It's saying at least 5 to 10 trials. Some of those students we see that are winning the bigger prizes at the fairs are doing a lot more trials. If you were doing, again, not at the elementary level, but at the secondary level, if you're doing something that's involving a survey, for example, at least 100 people need to respond to that survey for it really to become competitive. Plant projects, I worked a lot with plant projects, and we'd always say you can't just do 1 or 2 plants, you have to have hundreds of plants. So trying to do things that are small and easy to grow, like grasses, are a lot easier to get those numbers, a lot harder if you're getting roses, for example. So just make sure you're thinking through how you can gather your data, how much information you can get. And I like this, at least 5 to 10 trials. That's where you're repeating your process, you're repeating your test over and over again to get more data. The more times you're able to do that, the more accurate your results are going to be when you look at averages. Let's look at graphs. How you graph it is really important. In science, of course, we are graphing, we say dry weave. The independent variable is on the x-axis and the dependent variable is on the y-axis. Again, your teacher will help you with this. Make sure that you're including your units of measurement so that anyone that is reading that graph can easily tell what it is, what units we're using. Everything needs to be just very clear for the judges to see. There's information on data analysis here, how to think through looking at your data, and of course, drawing your conclusion. There are some hints. I like this in 8th grade benchmark states that you should say the data supports my hypothesis or the data did not support my hypothesis. Again, that is very standard. We don't say I was right or I was wrong. Use the wording. The packet is awesome because it is giving you a lot of hints and a lot of helps to be successful, especially, again, if you are choosing to compete in some of these other competitions that could get you into these other fairs. So you do have to complete a research paper, and it is required, again, no matter what fair level you're at, you need to have at least 5 references. You can have more, you cannot have less. Again, I have seen projects flagged and students have to go and talk to state folks to try to see if they would even be eligible to compete just because they only had 4 references. Make sure you're following these rules because they are really strict when we start looking at those higher level fairs. And so we're modeling that. Another thing I didn't mention, but all of our testing, whether it's elementary or middle school, or even our biology test, they are following ISIF rules when they are coming up with those test scenarios when they're creating their questions on the state test. So ISIF rules, again, are just, they're the standard in science, and they're best practices. So this is going to give you some information on getting your bibliography, plus looking at the benchmarks where we're seeing that test. So it's super important. And then I like this also because this is giving a sample science project topic proposal. So, you know, going to your teacher and saying, this is what I do, can I do it? And having them approve. So your teacher may or may not use this, but it is a great format to follow. It's identifying your variables, looking at your controls. So it's great. Also getting your materials, your procedures, just kind of helping you outline it. And if you follow this, it will take you through the process from beginning to end and help you be more successful with that project. So I'm going to pause now and see, does anyone have any questions about the secondary science fair? And again, Ms. Baker, since you're on here, I'll get you to help me answer questions. So please feel free to come off mute if you have any questions.
Yeah, one question is, you showed us some dates when they start, and then are they published somewhere, or can you share with us?
Yes, so let me go back to that. And Ms. Baker, I'm going to get you to, again, help me with this. Here, the timeline is it's still showing the 2021-22. I believe that's going to be updated probably soon. Am I correct, Ms. Baker, or do the schools have that directly?
Yes. So the person who is in charge of our science fair, she's planning on doing it by the Monday of next week.
Okay, but teachers probably have a pretty good grasp on this. So if
yes,
they do have some questions, they can go to their teachers. Perfect.
Right. So the second question is, if there is no teacher helping the project, and then if the student wants to do the project on his own, what's the approach? And then there's no teacher at the school that who can.
Oh, okay. I understand what you're talking about. The science fair sponsor.
Yes.
Your school. You're at I know what school. But this isn't necessarily for a science fair sponsor. All teachers have this information, and they are required to give it to a student who asks. But you're talking about the sponsor for the science fair, and that'll be worked out through me. I believe I've already spoken to you about your student being able to participate in the fair if the school does not want to sponsor the student. But as far as just getting the guidelines and all of that, they can get it from their science teacher.
Okay. But otherwise, you would be the point of contact for any questions if he's doing the project on his own.
If he wants to come to the district science fair on his own, yes. But his teacher can answer any science fair project questions and can and should be able to give him the package.
When you say teacher, they have a lot of teachers.
Their science teacher at their school, any one of them, if they're taking multiple sciences, all science teachers have the package.
Okay.
Perfect. Some good questions. Any other questions? Okay. Also, Dr. Penix is amazing. I believe she's still facilitating the secondary fair. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Baker. She's amazing, and she also is a wealth of information and knowledge. She is just absolutely wonderful with information. So all this information is on the website. Again, it will be updated, but that science fair handbook is what I really wanted to focus on right now, because that is, again, the standard. Any other questions before I move on? Because I want to look at secondary, some of the other fairs that you could possibly go to if you are selected or if you choose to compete at the regional fair. So I'm not hearing any other questions, so I'm going to kind of pop back to my slideshow again. There are let me pull this up. Okay, there are some other fairs once you reach the secondary level that you can compete in. One of the fairs is the Northeast Florida Regional and Science and Engineering Fair. That's specifically our Jacksonville region. We'll look at the website in a minute. But in order to get to the state fair or the international fair, or even some of our middle schoolers have options where they could win a chance to compete in a Broadcom Masters, which is, again, just another really cool middle school option. But the only way to be selected to get to these other fairs is to compete in the Northeast Florida Regional Science and Engineering Fair. They would be selecting those winning projects that would be sponsored and would be able to go to the state fair or to the international fair, again, Broadcom Masters. So we'll look at those in just a second, but understand it's a process. And if you were to compete in the Northeast Florida Regional Science and Engineering Fair, and if you weren't selected, that would be the end of your science journey for that year. It's not the end overall, because hopefully you're still inspired to keep going, because science is a process. Some of my more successful students, I worked with one student that started, well, she was doing science fair from elementary school on. There were a couple of years that her project just wasn't that competitive, didn't get into the other fairs. She kept plugging, kept going. Her senior year, she competed in the state fair and the international fair, and she won $120,000 in cash and scholarships. She ended up going on a full ride scholarship to Duke University, and I haven't followed up with her recently, but she was pursuing the medical field. So again, the options are there, and don't get discouraged if you're not successful at first, or if you have been successful but you have, a rougher year. That's okay. A lot of students are competing in these fairs, and the competition is tight, but the science is there. It's awesome. If you go through, and we're going to look at the websites here in just a second, but if you go through Northeast Florida Regional Science and Engineering Fair, and if you were selected, again, middle school and high school projects only, if you were selected, some of you may end up going to the Florida State Science and Engineering Fair. That fair is held in Lakeland, I believe in March. I'd have to look. I'm not updated on the date, so I apologize for that. And again, Ms. Baker, if there's anything that you know on that, but I believe it's in March. And the Florida State Science and Engineering Fair is for those students that won at the regional fair that are middle and high school. It is a wonderful fair. It is 3 days. It is my students that have attended in the past. It's very encouraging. It just really makes you excited about science, and the information that you're getting from judging, what the judges are sharing, the input that they're giving you on the project is just so helpful with helping take it to the next level. And again, success stories. We've had students. I had one student, again, another one. Again, between the state fair and international fair, $60,000. So there's a lot of money that's donated by businesses to the fairs. The Florida State Science and Engineering Fair usually gives away $1.3 million in cash and prizes every year. And that, of course, is including some scholarships that they'll give. So some students from the Florida State Science and Engineering Fair, if you were high school only, may be selected to go to the International Science Fair. Regional Science Fair would be able to send 1 or 2 students to the International Science Fair. So that would be, again, kind of, I call it that final level of competition for high school students. It is not open for middle school students. So even if you've got the best project and won the top prizes at state as a middle schooler, you still would not be eligible for ISIF until you're in high school. It is a high school competition. And I know Ms. Baker took some of our DCPS students last year. We had so many successful students. It is wonderful. And I don't know if you want to come off mute and say anything about the International Science and Engineering Fair, Ms. Baker.
The experience is definitely not like no other. They have social events for the students. They have networking events for the students. The different companies that sponsor the different categories have luncheons with the students. There are just so many opportunities at the International Science Fair. So just like Ms. Schnauz said, once you get a student excited about it, don't let them give up, because those second and those third year projects are definitely just as viable as the kids that go the first time. So definitely I just want to echo what Ms. Schnaus is saying. It's a wonderful experience for the students.
It really is. So I'm going to come out because I want to show a couple of websites if you are interested in pursuing the Northeast Florida Regional Science and Engineering Fair. We call it NEFRSF. If you Google it, it's NEFRSF, NEFRSEF.org. But this has information on the Regional Science Fair. Again, this is for our Jacksonville students. It's for all students in our area that would be eligible to compete. And if you look here, we see these are the students that competed in the International Science Fair in 2022. That was in Atlanta last May. And we can see we had some winners here. So we had a second place, $2,000, a third place, $1,000, fourth place, $500, another first place with a $1,000 award from the CIA. I love this last one, special award of $200 from the Educational Foundation of Saudi Arabia, but a $15,000 scholarship from the Office of Naval Research. So again, we get into some money in the International Science Fair gives away $8 million in cash and scholarship. Businesses are wanting science strong brains. That is what our future is. So businesses will sponsor this. A lot of organizations will sponsor some of these awards and prizes. Again, just phenomenal opportunity. So this is NEFRSF. Please be aware if you are planning, if you want to, and again, you're middle school or high school, you have to be middle school or high school in order to compete in this. Please go look at this. There are a lot of rules. The rules and guidelines you can find here. Some of the forms that have to be done are listed right here. Lots of information at this website. Of course, if you go on to the state fair, you have to be eligible, you have to compete and win at NEFRSF. So that is where you need to go if you are interested in those next levels. Are there any questions? If not, I have a couple of just one really cool video that follows one of our Florida students that won $100,000, and you can kind of see how her project developed over time. It's just a minute. I want to show that, but before I do that, do we have any questions? Any. So this is actually on the State Science and Engineering Fair website. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to play this. Bear with me. I think I have to get out of it to play it. Okay. Sorry, let me press play first.
$1,000 individual winner of the Siemens competition in 2015 is Maria Elena Grimmett from Oxbridge Academy of the Palm Beaches in West Palm Beach, Florida. Congratulations.
STEM, I believe, is going to be the future of this country. If we don't have people innovating, and if we don't have people who are constantly coming up with new and innovative ideas, we're never going to go forward and move together as a society. I've had an amazing 7-year journey with my scientific research, and it all started with the Florida State Science and Engineering Fair back in April 2010. When I was 11, I first presented my research there regarding the removal of color from well water using tiny plastic beads. Over the next 6 years, that research blossomed into an important new water remediation method to remove pharmaceuticals from contaminated water around the world, and it's now been published in the Journal of Environmental Quality. I'm very excited to say that real-world implementation is now on the horizon. None of this would have been possible without science fairs. The Florida State Science and Engineering Fair gives students like me the opportunity to tackle real-world problems. It teaches us to be resourceful and to think outside the box. We learn the importance of determination and perseverance. We learn about teamwork and collaboration. We see firsthand the product of innovation and creativity, and the amazing places it can take us. Looking back, I now see that Science Fair has shaped who I am today, and I'm confident it's done the same for many other students. I ask for your help in supporting the Florida State Science and Engineering Fair.
I'm going to pause it there because then it just talks about donations. But you can see here's one student that was inspired, had something she was passionate about. She continued on with that research all through high school, and her senior year, $100,000. And that is one of our Florida success stories. So some wonderful opportunities. I want to share another science fair. I call it just a wonderful story that I had as a teacher. One of my students had a dad who was an innovator. He was actually came in and taught to my class about science fair and told us that when he was young, when he was early elementary school, he thought it would be the coolest thing in the entire world to have a boat that could turn into a submarine. So this became his passion. When he came and he taught to us, he was in his late 30s, early 40s, and he had been just, he kept researching and finding and trying different things, and he kept engineering. So basically working out of his garage, working with friends, just having fun with it. Kept following up with him, and I'd say about 5 or 6 years ago, he actually was very successful with his project. It's now, I was Googling him and I see that he's got his submersible submarines, or what they're called, for sale for $1 billion each. I believe he's in the process of working out a military contract. So his success story in science fair, was starting in elementary school with that passion, but it wasn't until he was in his 40s, maybe even his 50s, that he saw that payoff. He saw that success, and that financial gain, of course, followed from that. But that wasn't why he did it. He did it because he was just passionate about it. It was something he was really interested in. I believe we are close to time. So again, I'm going to pause. Any questions whatsoever? Please feel free to come off mute. Okay, still not hearing anything. The only other place I'm going to look at is here at the ISIF main page. The next ISIF fair, and this is for high schoolers only, will be in May 19th or 13th through the 19th. And it looks like it's going to, I believe, be in Texas this year. Yes, Dallas, Texas. So please look, see what other people have done. If you're wanting some inspiration, there's some great videos out there on the science fair. And like I said, Disney right now, Disney Plus has got that science fair movie that is following students as they are competing in the ISIF, in this International Science and Engineering Fair. So very inspirational, some wonderful stories. I really appreciate you all joining us tonight. If you do have any questions, again, please feel free to come off mute. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Janet Snells. I'm one of the elementary science specialists. More than willing to answer any questions that you might have about elementary science projects or science just in general. Ms. Baker, Dr. Spinner, I know are here with us, and they are here to help with any questions you have. But we have a wonderful specialist team, and Dr. Penix kind of heads up that science fair piece on the secondary level. The last thing I want to say is please talk to your teachers. They have all the information to hand out. They've got packets. Some school packets are very specific to help guide your student even further, that work with your teachers. They are phenomenal. We've got some wonderful teachers here in Duval County. Thank you so much.